thank you all for coming to listen to me waffle for a bit of time today. So first of all, thanks very much for coming. Thanks for letting me speak to you. Hopefully I'll have something that's of interest to you, that's for sure. So for those of you who don't know me, so I'm James. So I'm the SE manager for Ireland and Scotland. And I have the privilege of working with some of the best sales and technical people that I've ever worked with, to be honest. So I'm really quite privileged in having this role. So, I mean, for my career, I originally started in the NHS many moons ago, more years than I care to remember. And from there, I moved in consultancy and then up into kind of vendor land, which is where I am now working for Nutanix. And I've been here for, near enough 5 years, well, nearly 6 years now, actually, to be honest. So what I was asked to do today was just come and talk about, the whole subject is digital transformation. So what I'm not going to do is sit here and talk to you about Nutanix products and how great they are and all that sort of stuff. As Ben says, if you want to know more about this, there's a whole booth with people who can talk to you about our technology. But really, what I wanted to talk about was more around about, the transformation journey, how it's different today, because of all the things that are going on. There's a hot topic at the moment is all really, COVID and all these sorts of things and the changes that it's made. And I'm very fortunate in the fact I get to work occasionally with a chap called David McWilliams, who's based out of Dublin. And David is he's an economist. So he used to work for the Central European Bank and various other things. And he spends his time now going about and talking about, recessions and pandemics and the effect and all that sort of stuff. So he's coined a phrase now called the pandation, which I'm going to steal from him because I think it's quite good, which is the fact that, we are in a pandemic and a recession, and we're lucky enough to be getting hit by Brexit and, all sorts of other things going on. We might have Scottish independence again and so on and so forth. So it was just to have a chat really about, all these things, how it's impacting businesses, what we can do as part of this transformation journey that we're all being forced to go through, and just ways to think about it and things to consider. So this is a chap that I regard very highly. There's a man called Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you know him or not, but he is he's a pundit. He works for the New Yorker. He's actually an English chap. And he's he's a staff journalist on the New Yorker, and people talk about him and say he's got a strikingly different way of looking at the world, and this is his kind of thing. He likes to look at situations and look at problems and approach them from a different direction. So for those of you who've seen me talk before, I usually go off on a tangent about all this sort of stuff, and you're probably thinking that now, but there's one specific talk he does all about spaghetti sauce, and yes, James is going off on a tangent, but it reverberates very nicely with where we are today. So there's a link there. You can go and watch it if you want to. But what he talks about is a friend of his he was an analyst, and he was invited by Pepsi to go and have a look at the products. So one of the things they were doing at the time was they were looking at Diet Pepsi and how they can make it better and get more market share and all these sorts of things. So they were trying to work out the exact amount of sweetener to put into Pepsi. So he did what probably everybody did and traditionally was the way to do it, and he thought, right, okay, what we'll do is we'll make a whole batch of different Pepsis with different amounts of sweetener in them. We'll go out, we'll go all round, and we'll get people to do taste tests. We'll gather all the data together. We'll come back, we'll analyze the data, and that will tell us exactly kind of how much we should put in to get the best response from the market. So that's exactly what he did. So off he went. He spent months going around America, getting people to taste various versions of Pepsi and score it and gather all the data together. And he came back and took the data, he analysed it, he plotted it all on nice charts and things. And what he expected was to find a bell curve, whereby at the top of the bell curve is going to be the sort of sweet spot, boom, boom, of what people would like. Unfortunately, what he got was just this scatter of data that made no sense at all to him. So he looked at it and he looked at it, and there was no kind of commonality. There was nothing that he could say that would pinpoint exactly what to do. So in the end, Pepsi just went down the middle, so yeah, we'll go with that one, and that's what they did, and that was fine. But this bothered him for years and years and years. And luckily enough, he got the opportunity to do a similar thing for Campbell's. So at this point in time, Campbell's made spaghetti sauce. hence the name of the tech talk. And the spaghetti sauce was okay, and it was doing well, but there was a new competitor, which was Ragu, had come into the market and was stealing all the market share. So Campbell's basically got him in to do the same thing. Let's have a look at what we've got. Let's work out how we can make it better, and we can, recapture our market share. So he did the same thing. So he worked with Campbell's. He made 75 different varieties of ragu sauce, not ragu sauce, I shouldn't say that, spaghetti sauce. And he went out and he did the taste test thing. What he did was he would go all around the country. He'd get hundreds of people into big rooms for 2 hours at a time, get them to taste all of these spaghetti sauces, score them out of 10, gather the data. So he spent, a long time doing this, months and months and months on the road, gathering the data. And then he came back and he did the same as before, which was he got all the data, he plotted it all on charts, and he looked at it. And the result he got was exactly the same. So again, he had this result, which was just a scattergun approach of, different plots all over the place, and everybody wanted something different, and none of it made any sense. There was no commonality to it. So because he'd been thinking about this for so long, he had a plan. And his plan was not to look for the universal truth, okay? So what he did was he looked at this and he knew he wasn't going to get a single answer. He wasn't going to get a graph that had a bell curve in it that was going to tell him that's exactly the right thing to do. So what he did was he looked at variables or variances in the data. And what he came up with in the end were 3 groupings that seemed to it covered 90% of all the people on the charts, and one group liked sauce with more sugar, one group liked thinner sauce, and one group liked chunky sauce. So at that point in time, he went back to Campbell's and he said, look, about a third of the group like chunky sauce and no one's doing it. So what that meant was that turned into a $600 million business for Campbell's because he was able to do this. Now, I am on a tangent, as I do. But the whole point behind this is when we're looking at where we are today, when we're looking at business and when we're looking at the world and pandemics and COVIDs, and we're having to react to it, what we can't do is we can't look for a single universal truth. There's not going to be one thing that's going to solve it for us. What we need to do is we need to have options. We need to look around. We need to consider all the data that we have. And then we need to look and see where we can find these variances. And when we find them, and there's going to be more than one, there always is, there isn't a single answer to this. We need to then work with that. So I know I was talking about spaghetti sauce, but the whole idea behind it is there's lots of choice in this transformation piece. So let's think about it in a more smart way. So, if we look at traditionally how things have been, this is a bit of an old chart, this one now, this is a Gartner chart. The reality of IT spend historically has been on the run part of the business, keeping the lights on, just keeping all those servers running and all those applications running and paying for ELAs and licenses and all this sort of carry on. And the transformation was always a very, very small part of what IT was. You were very lucky if you had a big transformation budget because generally we were just business as usual and doing things. But nowadays, sticking with that same business as usual in this new brave world that we have, whereby people are working from home, people are working from elsewhere, we need access to everything, we need to turn this on its head. And it's not just things like budgets. If we start looking at what they call bimodal IT, it's the 2 ways of looking at things, the 2 sides of the brain, as it were. So, historically, we have been that traditional first way, where, your IT runs inside out. So traditional stuff first versus digital first, which is outside in. And again, things like reporting was always historical. So what have we done? What have we used? What have we achieved? Versus, what are we going to do? And being more predictive about it. The same comes with kind of visible value. So a lot of timers have been around about being more efficient and cost cutting. Whereas now we need to think more about, how do we create value with what we have? How are we going to do something with the digital economy that we now have that's going to help make us more money, make us more successful, make us treat more patients, whatever it happens to be. So again, all these things need to be flipped on their head, and finally, we start to think about people. because at the end of the day, this is one of the most important things, you know. And traditionally, again, it's all been about just controlling and running the IT shop, and you know, get rid of risk and minimizing it as much as we can. But now, because it's all changed so much, we need to become, as IT people, much more strategic. You know, IT isn't just part of the business anymore. It's not even just an enabler anymore. You know, IT is the thing that's going to strategically change the business and make it successful and get us through these very, very difficult times. You know, we need to create that kind of vision and have the ability to take considered risk and be able to move things forward to create that, you know, value creation culture, as it says on the slide there. So these are all the sorts of things that we need to consider, you know, everything from, you know, the financial side all the way through to how do we, as IT people, lead the business through the various stages that we're all going through just now to come out the other side and be successful and still keep going. So IDC have created what they call the 5-stage economic recovery model. This also is very impressive. So what they've done is they've identified, you know, basically the 5 economic situations that all businesses are going through. Okay, now we're not all at the same stage, you know, so we're not all in the economic slowdown stage or the return to growth stage. Every business, depending on what it is and what you're doing and your business objectives, are at different stages in this. And that's an important thing to recognize, you know, that everyone is at a different point. But what they've identified is during these 5 stages, there are business focuses that have come to the fore as part of them. So, you know, when COVID came out originally, it was all about business continuity. Okay, so that was all about, you know, oh my God, you know, I've got to shut my office. I can't have people close to each other. We've got all of these things going on. There's lockdowns, there's everything. How do I keep my business running? Yeah, so as part of that, you know, lots of businesses have put stuff in place, which is fine. And one of the big things has been public cloud. You know, hence the title of the presentation. You know, big driver for public cloud now, because it's a quick and it's an easy way to get some quick wins and create the continuity in the business, keep people working. You know, then naturally, you know, there's an economic slowdown, which we're all seeing at various points in our journey. So obviously there we need to start to consider cost optimization. But the thing to be wary of, as you know, IT leaders and CIOs and business owners and things, is cost optimization doesn't have to be about cutting cost. Okay, so cost optimization is about increasing value. If we go back to the previous slide, the bimodal IT slide, we start to think about, well, I don't need to cut costs from my business, but what I need to do is make my business better, more productive by optimizing it and looking at the technologies to do it. Okay, you know, in the recession, which is here and coming like a freight train, it's all about business resiliency. You know, and business resiliency isn't about you know, looking at a way to maintain, you know, SLAs and to, you know, cope with severe disruptions of IT systems and things. Business resiliency is about the ability for the organization to respond to business disruption, you know, restore operations in a timely fashion, you know, and maintain that core sense of purpose. You know, it's all about making sure that the crown jewels for your business are always there, and making sure that you're agile enough to be able to change as the business objectives change as we go through these stages, because they will, and they are. You know, we see plans are changing, things are moving. No one really knows what's going to happen, you know, next week, next month. Are we going to go into more of a lockdown, less of a lockdown, all these sorts of things. So we need to be very, very agile around about how we can respond to these business objective changes. And then the final 2 pieces, which are very, very interesting, are the return to growth phase. So by that, we're looking at, you know, we've gone through the pandemic piece. So we've had the panic over COVID and lockdown and remote working and all these sorts of things. You know, we've gone through that economic slowdown into recession. We're starting to come out the other side. So the return to growth is something that we should all be thinking of now. It's not something that should be left till the very end, because we need to be planning for this. So when we have the business in a good place, when our IT systems are doing exactly what we need them to do, how are we going to maximize on that? However, what are we going to target as our organization to be able to maximize on coming out and returning back to a growth industry again? And the final piece is going to be, what's the future? What is it going to look like? I think we've maybe all come to the realization that, the world's never going to be the same again. We're not going to all be back to offices 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. People are going to be working from home. People are going to be doing split weeks. People aren't traveling as much. People are doing video conferencing, all these sorts of things. So how are we going to do that? And as an IT organization, how are we going to support that? And as it changes, how are we going to be able to change with it? So, the important things to take out of this are, just recognize where you are in these stages. And you're not alone, but not everyone's at the same place as you. Okay. Make sure you know what your priorities are. Align them with the business objectives and be ready to change them, because they're going to change very quickly as well. You have to keep the business running and doing all the things that you do now. That will create something called technical debt that I will talk about in a minute. But you have to do that and optimize what you've got and how you're using technology. And that doesn't mean you buy all new stuff and you have to go all into the public cloud, or you buy new servers or new infrastructure. It doesn't mean you don't do anything with it. You just keep running what you did. Optimize what you've got and make the very, very best out of what you have. So a very intelligent man, once said, we can't solve our problems the same thinking we used when we created them. And he's absolutely right. And again, if we refer back to kind of what the budgets used to be like, the whole model of bimodal IT, we have to change. And it's something I've spoken about this before in the past, and how we move forward and how we become a transformational organization and how we can do it and how we can go about it. But one of the, I suppose, good things of the COVID crisis is that's accelerated it. This journey for many organizations has accelerated so rapidly because of this, because we've all been forced to move into this place, that it's really driving a lot of kind of innovation and value creation across all industries, whether it is, healthcare or financial services or whatever it is. It's actually been quite a powerful motivator for a lot of people. So, when we start to now look at kind of predictions for what's going to happen in the IT industry over the next 5 years, it looks a bit like this. So, these are the results of various surveys and things that have gone on. It's all independent. It's not a Nutanix thing. This is IDC surveys. But these are the kind of predictions and trends that they see coming over the next 5 years. So you'll see there, prediction number 1 is cloud-centric IT, and I think we're already there. It says kind of end of 2021, but we're already there, and what they're saying is that basically 80% of enterprises will have some kind of mechanism in place to move to a cloud-centric infrastructure and applications twice as fast as before the pandemic happened. And we see that now. So we see there's a massive uptake in public cloud. We see a lot of it has been forced upon us. And a lot of these things have been done, I don't want to say in a knee-jerk way, but very, very quickly. Businesses have had to put something in place to enable, a kind of hybrid workforce that are going to be not in the office, but still need access to everything to maintain the business and keep it running. So if you're not doing it already, and I'm sure probably the majority of you are at least thinking about it, if not doing some of it, it's going to become more and more prevalent over the next, 6 to 12 months. The second thing they see, which is kind of one of the highest cost and most complex things to do, is increase the acceleration at the edge. Now, depending on what you do and what your business is, edge can mean different things to you. So whether that's remote offices, branch offices, if it's just people working out in the field, people working from home, we're going to have to get better at it, and pretty rapidly, over the next 2 to 3 years. So, what they're saying is, there's going to be real changes in the workforce over this period of the next few years. And, you know, as I was saying, I don't think we're ever going to go back to where we were. And we think that's going to be accelerated for probably 80% of edge-driven investments, you know, and business model changes across all organizations. And it's a very, very complex thing to do. You know, how can you today have somebody working in an office, or let's say 6 months ago, they're working in an office, now they're working from home, but they need to have access to all the same things, have the same experience, have the same performance, and be able to do their jobs as effectively from anywhere as they did previously. So there, you know, there's a lot of onus on that one as well. I think number 3 is everything is going to be hybrid by design. And when we say hybrid by design, that covers a whole gamut of different things as well. So, you know, hybrid as in infrastructure. So are we going to have some private cloud, some public cloud, a mixture of the both? Is it going to be one public cloud, 2, 3? Do you know what you're going to run them on? All these sorts of things. But also hybrid workers. So again, this comes back to people who are working all or some of the time in the office, all or some of the time remotely, can be anywhere. You know, how are we replacing, you know, what were face-to-face meetings? You know, is it all going to be Zoom? Because we all suffer Zoom fatigue nowadays when you sit doing this or listening to someone like me for quite a while, hours every day. You know, but we've been able to do that, you know, and we needed to give them that technical parity moving forward, whereby they can do their jobs from anywhere. Okay, and again, you know, it's going to be a complex thing to do for everybody. Number 4, we need to remediate technical debt. So what I mean by technical debt is, you know, solutions have been put in place quickly because we've had to. And perhaps that was before some of the business objectives have changed for your organization. So as the business objectives are changing, the solutions that we've put in place maybe aren't the best ones. So these things are going to be creating a technical debt in the fact they're going to cost, you know, financially money. They're going to take a lot of time potentially to manage. We need specialist skills in them, so on and so forth. So we need to start looking at what we do to remediate that technical debt, because what we need moving forward as a whole is we need to have a much more simplified infrastructure for everything, you know, and whether that's, you know, offloading stuff to public cloud, running stuff more simply in a private cloud, melding them together, moving things between them. We need to have the business objectives and the strategy to be able to deliver that. And in delivering that, we need to do it in the best, most efficient way possible. So, you know, we're all building technical debt at the moment as we're doing things and changing things and implementing solutions. So we just need to start being aware of them, starting to think, you know, how this will work with the business and be able to help us moving forward. Number 5 is data resiliency. So data resiliency, digital resiliency, it's an interesting concept. By this, I don't mean business continuity. I don't mean disaster recovery plans and things like that. You know, data resiliency is all about being able to adapt to disruption within the business, you know, and extend services as new conditions arise. So you need to be able to be very, very agile as an organization and be able to grow and change and move. And, you know, what IMDC have found is that, you know, businesses who have got a lot of good digital resiliency and are very agile are able to accelerate through the 5 stages, you know, twice as fast as organizations who don't, because they're able to respond and make changes and do things as they need to, you know, as the business is demanding them to do it. Number 6, automation platforms. So by automation platforms, that covers kind of, you know, a wide scale of different things. You know, what are we automating? You know, are we automating deploying stuff? You know, we're automating getting new users on the system, deploying new applications. And what it can also mean though is where are we doing it to? You know, what we want is and it links number 6 and 7 together when we talk about opportunistic AI extensions. What we need to have, because most likely, if we go back to Malcolm Gladwell, you know, we're not going to find a single truth. Okay, so we're not going to find that what we're going to do as organization Nutanix is we are going to put everything in AWS, and that's going to fix all our problems, you know, or we're going to put everything in a big couple of data centers that we've got somewhere. You know, what we're going to do is we're going to find these variances, and we're going to end up with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different things, whereby I'm going to have some stuff in my data center still, because it makes sense to keep it there, because, you know, I need that performance, I need that data security, I need to get hands-on. But some other things I'm going to put in AWS and maybe Azure. Other things I'm going to have as a SaaS product. I'm going to go Office 365, and, you know, I'm going to have, you know, Salesforce as a SaaS product. So we're going to end up with all these variances. And when we start talking about automation and opportunistic AI, you know, what we need moving forward is we need a solution and an infrastructure or a software that's going to allow us to evaluate all of these things intelligently and decide where the best place is to put them, you know, based on a bunch of criteria, whether that the most important thing to use an organization's cost, or its performance, or its availability. We need to be able to automatically look at this, remediate it, and use it, and have it all AI driven, so it makes sense for us as a business. And what that's going to do is that's going to really change the workforce in a lot of ways. You know, so traditionally, your IT workforce is mainly specialists. You know, you'll have specialists in networking, specialists in virtualization, specialists in database, specialists in operating systems, all these sorts of things. But moving forward, we need to flatten that out a bit, because the problem with having an infrastructure like that and a team like that is, while we have some great skills in there and they're very, very good at what they do, it makes you less agile. It's more difficult to make changes when the business needs them quickly, if we have lots of different silos of technology and different silos of skills who all need to try and come together. Moving forward, what IDC are saying is we should all be looking to have more generalists. So people who can cover, you know, a wide range of products and technologies. And the way to do that is to have the software and the technology in place that takes away all of this, the kind of special skills. Okay, so a lot of it will come into the automation platform and the, you know, the AI that's going to drive it, and that will allow the platform to manage itself, maintain itself, making it much more simple, and allowing generalists to look after it better. Okay, so number 8 is about the IT ecosystem. So that is absolutely going to change. You know, that's kind of all the things we're talking about. You know, they reckon that about 80% of enterprises are going to change the relationships with suppliers. And this makes absolute sense. Okay, so when I looked at this originally, I thought, oh, 2025, that seems really far away to start doing that. It doesn't make sense to me. But when you think about it, when you think about these kind of relationships, you know, traditionally, a lot of organizations, what they'll do is they will go and buy infrastructure, and we'll buy it and we'll run it for 5 years. Okay, so hence 2025. At the end of 5 years, we'll go out, we'll find the new technology, we'll refresh it, and we'll go again. But now, particularly now, with all the stuff that's going on, that doesn't make sense. Okay, so when you look at how much your business is going to change and how much the demands on IT are changing even now, and the things you've had to do to get to where we are today, buying something and running it for that length of time without having an option to change it makes absolutely no sense. Okay, and this is one of the very, very attractive things of the public cloud. You know, public cloud, you can pay, you know, by the minute, by the hour, by the month, annually, all that sort of stuff. You generally don't go in and go to, you know, a public cloud provider and say, I would like to buy 5 years worth of public cloud, please. And that's what I'm going to put in it. Okay, what you do is you pay for what you use, and you can flex up and down. And the same thing needs to happen across all the different technologies that we use. Okay, and it's actually something that, you know, I said I wasn't going to talk about Nutanix, but very briefly, something we've done. So as an organization, and I think we're quite ahead of the game in this, we've recognized this. You know, we've recognized that customers who use our software are going to go through this journey now where they're going to want to change. Okay, so what we've done now is we have the ability to do things on a subscription basis. Okay, so you can pay for it annually or 2 years or 3 years or monthly, quarterly, all these sorts of things to suit your business. And that means you can be agile. It means you can flex up and down as the business needs it. And it also means that licenses are transportable. So for example, you could say to me, James, today I've got all these servers in my data center. I want to move some to AWS and some to Azure. Okay. And that's exactly where our model fits, because we can say to you, well, that's absolutely fine. Put some stuff in your data center. As you move it, the platform is going to recommend where it's to go. It'll move it for you automatically, and the licenses can move with it as well. And that's going to be one of the big cruxes, because traditionally, and I say this as a software vendor, we used to love the fact that people would buy a big ELA for 5 years, because we knew that, yep, okay, there's a big chunk of money coming to the business, and that customer is going to stay with us for 5 years. Okay, it could be too expensive for them to move. Whereas now we recognize that that's not the case. We have confidence in what Nutanix does and the software and its capabilities, whereby we can say, okay, take a shorter term, it makes sense for you. That means at the end of this term, you can, not buy as many licenses or buy a few more licenses or move them to somewhere else and continue using it. And I think that, by 2025, I think a lot of organizations are going to have to fall into this same kind of mold, because the demand is going to be there for it. No one now wants to invest large amounts of money to be stuck with something for a long time when none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow at the best time. So number 9, the circular economy. So that one's out there yet. So this is all about renewable energy and carbon footprints and things. So again, when it comes to cost cutting, when it comes to optimizing, when IDC are saying that all organizations are going to kind of come under the hammer for that a bit. And most importantly, number 10 is people still matter. Okay, they're the core of every business. And I know I've spoken about you need generalists and people who can just look after things and the platform manages itself. That's fine. You still need people with a specific set of skills. When we start to look at hybrid workforces and business automations and things, what they're saying is that more than half of projects are going to be delayed or fail because we don't have the right skills in place for it. And we need to be clear on what the skills are. Lots of businesses are talking about moving to public cloud outside their sphere of influence, so on and so forth. So we need to be starting thinking about, security, DevOps, cyber security, all these things as well. So while we're still saying generalists are good, there are still skills, and we need to recognize what they are. We need to make sure they're in place for when we want to. So when we talk about this, we're talking about, speed of survival. And we know that because we've all had to do things very quickly over the last little while. But the key thing here is momentum as well. So, everybody started very quickly. They talk about the sprint, which was that initial business continuity phase. So people have gone really fast, got all that done, created that technical debt by putting things in place. And as we're going through these other stages, the speed is not such a priority, but we don't want to lose momentum, okay? Because, and half of the organizations that are slow to implement change, they tend to find that that agility isn't there, and they can't respond to the business as it needs to as we move through the other stages. So, the key things we need to think about, are, let's innovate. Yeah, we have a chance now, an opportunity now, and in fact, we're being forced to innovate to make sure that our businesses keep going. And the place to do that is at the edge or out there, where your workers are. They're the people that need it, so we need to listen to them, and we need to allow them to adapt to it, and then continue to change as we need to. We need to leverage cloud, absolutely, but there are a whole bunch of fixed costs, and it'll allow us to do things much faster. Okay, but again, we need to just be aware of what we're doing and think about it, so we're not just creating that technical debt. Okay, agility is key for everything. Moving forward, we don't know what the demands are going to be. We don't know if things are going to be faster, slower, bigger, smaller. So we need to make sure that when we're looking at transforming, we're able to have that ability to flex up and down and move things around to the best place for them to be for the business. Yeah, we need to tolerate that technical debt that we've built, which I've talked about a few times now, but you know, it's a risk and it's there. Just be aware of it, because you're going to have to deal with it at some point. And then 3 things that we really need to do together are to rationalize our infrastructure, modernize it, and innovate at the same time. There's no point in trying to do one of these things on its own. They're all absolutely lockstep together, and working together, this is how we're going to move through the various stages. And then focus on what matters. And right now, there's an awful lot of noise. You know, a whole bunch of things need to be done, but align with the business, align with the outcomes for the business, and focus on that. Other things can wait. You know, the key thing at the moment, regardless of which stage you're in, is we need to keep the business going, and we need to make it successful and able to move out the other side. Key thing, uncertainty. Yeah. So I've said it more than once, none of us know what's going to happen. None of us know exactly what the changes are going to be, how the markets are going to change, how our customers are going to change, how our patients are going to change and their needs and demands, and how the staff that look after them are going to change. So we need to plan for that, and we need to build the agility and adaptability into that as well. And that goes across everything. You know, that's not just talking about IT systems and being able to, you know, scale them up and scale them down. You know, we need to look at, you know, our procurement processes. You know, how can we make them more adaptable? You know, how do we move from capital to the operational, your CapEx to OpEx spend? You know, in this brave new world of agility, we don't want to be shelling out large amounts of money for something to be locked into for a long time. We want it to be OpEx budget. We want it to be flexible and able to allow us to change in line with the business. You know, and when we look at kind of the uncertainty piece, you know, it seems to be, you can see from the chart at the top there, the 46% in the red circle. You know, lots of businesses have got good plans in place for the first few stages. But when it comes down to, you know, that the targeted investments, the return to growth, what are you going to do? It's not something you can leave till you're at that stage to start thinking about. We need to get plans in place for that now, so that we can be ready for them and the business can be ready for them. And also, you know, what's the future going to look like when it's running through? You know, is the infrastructure we've got, are the applications we've got, the solution we've got right for this brave new world that we're moving into? You know, and a lot of these things is all about planning. And I know it can be difficult at the moment because we've had to make a lot of changes very quickly. But, you know, we should plan out all the scenarios. You know, we don't know what the future is going to be. There's various possible things that are going to happen. So we need to start thinking through them, you know, and building models so we can understand what that's going to mean. You know, if the business wants to go in one direction because of a specific scenario, what are the various models? You know, if we do X, what's going to happen? Is it Y or Z? If Y happens, what happens? If Z happens, what happens? And use all these things and build them and then prioritize it. And again, I've said this a few times and I keep coming back to it, you know, it's all about the business strategy now, okay? So IT, as IT people, we are in prime position now, whereby we can get a seat at the top table, okay? So as traditionally, it's been all about, you know, IT's there to support the business. You know, it's our email, it's our database, it's all these sorts of things. But now IT can absolutely create value for the business by doing this and innovate for the business and take the organization through this whole phase of stages and this whole pandemic that's going on and bring us out the other side much stronger. So we need to be involved in the business strategy and choose and prioritize by the strategic relevance on that. You know, we need to mitigate all the risks that we can. You know, we need to make sure that when we are making changes, when we're, you know, building scenarios, what is the risk? How are we going to mitigate against it? Now, what are the business outcomes, and how do we quickly deliver on those business outcomes, especially when they change? So, if there's a business outcome today to do something, what happens if next week we decide, actually, that was the wrong thing? You know, we're doing a U-turn, we're going the other way. How do we as IT enable that? How do we make sure that we are agile enough and able to cope with that? So then when we start to look at some of the things that are going on, you can see the kind of key things here that businesses are looking at. So, rationalization, if I could say it properly, rationalizing costs and innovating for value, looking at capabilities and looking at the cloud. So how do we have a platform and a bunch of solutions and a bunch of systems that are going to be able to meet the business outcomes, be agile, be able to move? How are we going to decide where we're going to put things? We love the public cloud. It's a great idea. I can get rid of all that infrastructure stuff that I spend a lot of money on managing and maintaining, put it up there, and I just pay an OPEX cost for when it's used. But how do we manage that? How do we get to it? How do we predict what that's going to be? How do we control those costs? How do we make sure we're getting best value out of these things? And moving into the cloud, which cloud is it going to be? Which one? Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell. It's not going to be one. It's going to be more than one. And you can see here that, the one thing that people aren't doing now, is they're not planning to be less agile. It's all about agility. It's all about focusing on the business objectives and making sure they happen. And so, again, we just have to look at convergence is a great word. You'll see it in the blue box there. When we're looking at our forward-thinking strategy and what we're going to do, how do we create that convergence between what we've got and all our clouds and all our various things? And that's what we need to be thinking about. And these are the solutions we need to be looking for. We need to look for those solutions that are going to automate, make it intelligent, converge one or more clouds together. And importantly as well, move things between them. Move not just applications between them, move licenses between them, and also make recommendations. So do you want to be spending a lot of time paying for something that's running somewhere when it would be better somewhere else? We need to use AI and intelligence and machine learning to be able to help us make the best decisions for our organization. So, key takeaways. So, number one, this is the absolute point in time where IT gets a seat at the top table. So within your business, you're able to now make strategic decisions, have a strategic impact on the business, and become more than just an enabler. You are a key part of the business now. And IT is not going to go away. It's not going to get simpler. It's going to get more complex and more important to the business. And now's the time. So align with the business and make sure that you're able to move quickly and follow the business and help drive it on. Number two, risk. Nowadays, again, risk is more important than ever. In the fact that we are now exposing ourselves to the public world out there a lot more, we need to be aware of that. We have to look at things like, cyber threats. My data is now somewhere else. It's not in my nice data center down there. My data is now traveling across links to get to this and back. We need to be aware of that, and we need to own it and make sure, because these are the things that will come back to bite us in 6 years, 6 months, 12 months, as we put our data out there and we move more to this hybrid cloud model. The final thing is really be agile. I've said this a lot as well during this presentation. You've all got really good IT teams. Embrace them, bring them with you, get them into the agile mindset whereby we can move things along, we can change, and the business will come with you. Thank your team. This has been tough on them. It's been tough on everybody. And particularly the guys that are keeping the lights on for you, the guys that have kept stuff running, the guys who've been deploying new solutions to make sure people can still work. Thank them for it, because they've really earned their money in the last 6 months or so. So yeah, so back to my old friend Malcolm. So do watch his TED Talk. He's quite funny. He's a quirky character. He's quite amusing. But just bear in mind, that universal truth is not going to be there when you're looking at this transformation. So just protect yourselves, protect your businesses by making sure that you consider more than one, and you have the ability to harness them, use them, and move forward into the brave new future. And that's me. Thank you very much.